The forest stood silent, save for the occasional whisper of wind passing through the branches. The air was thick with the weight of untold stories, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and made every footstep feel intrusive. Deep in the heart of the sanctuary, a dense expanse of trees rose like a cathedral, their branches woven together into a canopy so thick that only dappled slivers of light managed to pierce through. It was the kind of place where the world felt suspended in time, a place where animals roamed free, untouched by the human hand. For the past several years, the sanctuary had been home to a variety of animals, exotic birds, elusive predators, and gentle creatures, each protected from the dangers outside. One such resident was a large, vibrant parrot named Amara. She was an unusual creature, her plumage a brilliant mix of emerald green and sapphire blue, her eyes sharp and intelligent, a creature so attuned to the rhythms of the forest that it seemed as though she could understand its very pulse. Amara's keeper, a young woman named Evelyn, had been tasked with the care of the sanctuary ever since the previous manager had mysteriously disappeared. She had inherited his cottage perched on the edge of the forest, a place that was both refuge and reminder of the solitude she had chosen. The heavy oak doors creaked and groaned as she entered, her footsteps echoing through the hollow silence. The house was simple, decorated with the relics of her predecessor, a mix of old photographs, animal tracks etched into wooden walls, and books filled with forgotten knowledge. Evelyn had always known that Amara was more than just a parrot. There was something haunting about the bird's presence, something almost otherworldly in the way she perched silently on her wooden perch, eyes always watching. Her feathers shimmered with the light of the setting sun, but it was the bird's silence, an unsettling, unbroken silence, that had troubled Evelyn. It was as if the parrot carried with it an unspoken burden, an echo of something long gone. One late afternoon, as Evelyn made her way back from the nearby stream, a cold, unsettling feeling settled in her bones. The forest was unusually quiet. No rustle of leaves, no distant calls of birds or animals. Only the soft crackle of her boots on the underbrush as she moved deeper into the woods. She had always felt a connection to this place, but today, something felt different. Something had shifted. As she neared the sanctuary's main clearing, she saw Amara. The parrot was perched on her usual branch, but unlike her usual calm demeanor, the bird was agitated, ruffling its feathers and darting its eyes in every direction. Evelyn stopped in her tracks, heart quickening. The bird's gaze locked onto her, and Evelyn felt a chill run through her. She had seen that look before, but never with such intensity. The wind stirred, shaking the leaves above, and Evelyn's eyes scanned the area. The stillness had returned. She shook her head, attempting to shake off the unease creeping into her mind. She reached out, her hand steady, calling for Amara to come closer. But the bird didn't respond. Instead, she tilted her head, slowly and deliberately, as if urging Evelyn to follow. A strange compulsion tugged at her as she walked toward the bird. Her feet felt heavy, the earth beneath her strangely unyielding. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees casting long shadows as the light of the fading sun flickered. Amara's eyes never left her. The parrot's feathers, once so brilliant, now seemed dulled, as though the bird had absorbed the very darkness of the forest. Suddenly, the parrot flapped its wings, a sharp cry breaking the silence. Evelyn froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sound of the wings echoed through the trees, followed by a series of low, drawn-out screeches. Words, or perhaps warnings, but none Evelyn could understand. She stepped back, unnerved, but the bird did not relent. Evelyn stumbled back, glancing around in confusion. The air was growing colder, a dense fog creeping along the forest floor, curling around the trunks of trees like a creeping phantom. She turned, as though to leave, but then, in a single, terrifying instant, Amara spoke. Leave, it's too late, leave now. The words hit Evelyn like a blow. Her legs froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never heard the parrot speak, at least not with clarity like this. The voice, raspy, faint, and distorted, seemed to reverberate through the air. Evelyn turned back toward the bird, her eyes wide with disbelief. Leave now? A primal instinct seized her, a feeling that something deeply wrong had taken root in the forest, something that had been there long before her arrival. She couldn't explain it, but the word leave echoed in her mind like a death knell. The fog had thickened, and the oppressive silence weighed heavier. The birds had stopped singing, the wind had died down, and even the animals seemed to have withdrawn into the shadows, leaving Evelyn alone with the parrot and the growing sense of danger. As she backed away, her foot struck a hard object hidden beneath the leaves. She knelt to investigate, hands trembling. Beneath the earth she found a rusted metal box. It was old, weathered by time, but it felt out of place, buried under years of untouched soil. The box clicked open with an agonizing creak, revealing a tattered letter, stained with age and moisture. Evelyn's eyes widened as she read the words in the dim light. The sanctuary is not what it seems. Do not trust the keeper. The forest remembers what has been forgotten. The parrot knows the truth. Trust the silence. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The letter, the words, were unmistakable. The previous keeper had written this, warning her, perhaps from beyond the grave. But it was too late. The forest had begun to stir. A low rumble echoed from deep within the trees, growing louder, as if the very land itself was waking. Amara's screech pierced the air once more, louder, more desperate. Evelyn stood, her heart racing, as the first shadow moved between the trees. The creature was massive, a figure cloaked in shadow, its form barely visible against the darkening sky. It moved with an eerie grace, a predator that stalked in silence, its eyes gleaming with a faint, unnatural light. Evelyn felt its presence before she saw it, a malevolent force that was bound to the land, tied to the very soul of the forest. Her legs froze. She wanted to run, but the parrot's voice, distorted, now full of sorrow, called out once more, its wings flapping in urgent desperation. You cannot escape. It is already here. It is part of you. The realization hit her with the force of a thunderclap. The sanctuary had never been a place of refuge. It had been a prison, a place where the forgotten had been buried, their sins hidden in the very earth. And the parrot Nemera had known all along. She was the keeper of secrets, the echo of a past that refused to remain silent. In that moment, Evelyn understood. She was not meant to stay, but as the creature drew closer, she realized with chilling clarity that it was already too late to leave. The forest had claimed her, and now it would never let her go. Amara's call rang out one final time, and the forest fell silent once more. The silence was deafening, a weight that pressed against Evelyn's chest like an invisible hand, choking her. The creature, now closer, moved with a deliberate slowness, its eyes reflecting the same eerie light that had seemed to pervade the sanctuary itself. Evelyn's heart hammered in her ears as she took a step back, the rustling of the leaves beneath her boots suddenly loud in the suffocating quiet. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the fog thick and suffocating wrapped around her like a prison, and the shadows of the trees stretched like long fingers clawing at the last slivers of daylight. Every instinct within her screamed to flee, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. The letters in her hands burned with a truth she was no longer certain she wanted to understand. Amara's screech rang out again. This time it was mournful, the cry of an animal who had lived through countless centuries of sorrow, the echo of something ancient. Evelyn looked toward the parrot. who was still perched on her branch, staring at her with a look that was no longer the intelligent gleam of a bird, but the gaze of something far older, something tied to the forest in ways Evelyn could not comprehend. For a moment, Evelyn thought she saw a flicker of recognition in the bird's eyes, a flash of the keeper's warning. The parrot knows the truth, trust the silence. But the silence was deafening now, and the truth that had been buried for so long was rising from the depths, clawing its way through the soil to claim her. The creature emerged fully from the shadows. A tall, sinuous figure, its body obscured in darkness, but its glowing eyes clear as the moon in a night sky. The air around it grew colder still, and Evelyn's breath began to frost before her. She could feel its gaze, cold and predatory, like a weight pressing down on her soul. Her fingers trembled, and the letter she had held so tightly fell to the ground, forgotten. The words from the letter, "Do not trust the keeper," flashed in her mind like a warning too late. But who was the keeper? Was it her, or had the forest already claimed its own protector in Amara? The creature stopped just in front of her, its eyes piercing through her very being. Its breath was cold, and the air around it pulsed with a strange energy, something that didn't belong to the world she knew. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, and this creature was its embodiment, its ancient guardian, tasked with keeping the secret of this cursed land. Evelyn's legs shook, but her mind, sharp and focused despite the fear creeping into her veins, refused to turn away. She couldn't run. She was trapped. The forest had always felt like a sanctuary to her. Its tranquil, serene beauty had drawn her in, but now it felt like a cage, a prison she had unknowingly stepped into. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the creature's throat, like the sound of distant thunder before a storm. Evelyn's breath quickened. It was waiting for something, watching her. And then, from the corner of her vision, something flickered. Movement. She turned her head just in time to see Amara leap from her perch. The bird's wings beat with powerful intensity, slicing through the air. It was not the fluttering of a bird desperate to escape. This was calculated, deliberate, as if Amara was making a move. One that Evelyn couldn't quite comprehend. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to freeze. Amara soared toward the creature, her wings cutting through the air in a graceful arc. As the bird neared the creature's shadowy form, the space around them seemed to twist, the air warping, distorting as if reality itself was bending. Amara's wings stopped in midair, frozen in an unnatural pause, and then, in a violent jolt, she was gone. The forest seemed to exhale. Evelyn stood motionless, her mind racing to understand what had just happened. Was Amara part of this, or had she been a prisoner as well? Had she been trying to protect her, or was the bird an unwilling participant in some dark pact that bound them all together? The creature's presence intensified, its form shifting in the dim light. It moved again, this time without hesitation, and Evelyn was forced to take a step back. But the ground beneath her shifted as well. A soft rumble like the heartbeat of the forest. The trees groaned, their ancient trunks bending as if to give way to something far older, far deeper than the roots of the forest itself. And then she saw it. A fissure in the earth, stretching wide enough to swallow her whole, opened up beneath the creature's feet. The ground trembled, and Evelyn could feel the very air around her vibrating with energy. The creature looked down at the split earth, its glowing eyes narrowing in recognition, and then it turned its gaze back to her. There was something familiar about that gaze, something ancient. You, the thought crossed her mind, before she could even process it. You're the keeper. The creature, the guardian, had never meant to harm her. It had never meant to hunt her down. It had been waiting for her, for Evelyn. And as the earth continued to split, she realized with terrifying clarity, the true keeper of this sanctuary had always been the forest itself, not Amara, not the one who had protected the sanctuary. It had been the land, and it was finally awakening, shedding the facade of peace and stillness, revealing its true face. Evelyn stumbled backward as the ground opened further, a chasm that seemed to go on forever. The creature, no longer a monster but something far greater, a manifestation of the sanctuary's forgotten past, extended a long, gnarled hand, offering her the choice to step forward, to claim her place within the darkness. The parrot's echo, "Trust the silence." The silence had been the secret all along. The forest had never wanted to protect her. It had only been waiting for her to understand. As the chasm continued to widen, Evelyn's gaze was drawn to the last light of the setting sun, its glow barely reaching through the canopy. Her heart thundered in her chest as she looked back at the creature, then at the empty, now silent space where Amara had been. She turned away from the creature's gaze and took her first tentative step toward the chasm. But just before she could fall into its depths, a strange calm washed over her. For the first time since stepping into the sanctuary, Evelyn understood the forest's call. The moment she took that step, a powerful force rippled through the air, like the forest itself had acknowledged her decision. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't from the chasm's widening. It was as if the very heart of the sanctuary was stirring, waking up after a long slumber. The air around her shifted, no longer oppressive, but filled with an eerie calmness. Evelyn's feet seemed to move on their own, drawn forward by an invisible pull. She wasn't sure if it was the forest itself guiding her, or if it was the knowledge that something far beyond her understanding had just unfolded. The creature, once so terrifying, now stood still, watching her every movement with an air of knowing. There was no malice in its eyes, only the solemn weight of time and the secrets it had been holding on to for centuries. As Evelyn stepped closer to the chasm, the sounds of the forest began to fade, leaving only the whispering of the wind through the trees. The distant calls of birds and the rustling of leaves seemed to quiet, replaced by an ancient hum that resonated deep within the earth. The air felt charged, as if the very molecules around her were vibrating with energy. She glanced back one last time at the parrot's perch. The tree was silent now, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. There was no trace of Amara, no indication of what had happened to the bird. But Evelyn felt, deep down, that Amara's presence had been more than just that of a companion. It had been the final piece of a puzzle, a guide for her to unlock the truth that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. With each step, the chasm grew wider, the edges jagged and deep, revealing nothing but a blackness that seemed to stretch into eternity. Evelyn hesitated for a fraction of a moment, the weight of her decision heavy upon her. She could feel the forest watching, listening, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. The creature made no sound, but its eyes never left her. The shadows that had once seemed so threatening now held an air of reverence. It was no longer the predator, it was a witness. A keeper, just as she had once been. The wind shifted once more, and with it, the subtle scent of earth and moss filled Evelyn's senses. It was as though the forest had accepted her as its own. She took another step forward. The chasm seemed to pulse with an unseen rhythm, drawing her in. The ground beneath her felt different now, not as solid and unyielding as it had before, but soft, almost as if the earth itself was offering her passage. She felt the pull growing stronger, urging her to step closer, to step into the unknown. The air was thick with anticipation. And then, without warning, she heard it. soft at first, almost inaudible, like the rustling of leaves in a breeze. But then it grew louder, more distinct, until it became a chant, a wordless sound that resonated deep within her chest. The words seemed to come from the earth, from the trees, from the very essence of the sanctuary itself. It was a voice ancient and powerful, carrying with it the weight of centuries, of wisdom and of knowledge long forgotten. "You have returned." Evelyn stopped in her tracks, the echo of the words reverberating in her mind. She wasn't sure if she had heard them aloud or if they had been inside her, but the message was clear. She had been chosen. The forest had called her, had waited for her to understand, and now it was inviting her into its depths. Without a word, she stepped forward into the chasm. As she descended, the darkness enveloped her, but it was not the suffocating void she had feared. It was soft, gentle, as though the forest was cradling her in its embrace. The walls of the chasm pulsed with an ethereal light, illuminating her path as she continued to sink deeper into the earth.